Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We're here to cut through the noise and really focus on the insights you need.
Absolutely.
And today, wow, we're diving into something pretty intense.
Yeah.
A claim from our source material that we're basically on the edge of the greatest robbery in history. All happening during this great reset that apparently promises, well, total control.
It's definitely a perspective that grabs your attention. Our deep dive today is looking at the views of Jeroen Pols, taken from a YouTube video transcript.
Right.
And he paints this picture of, well, huge societal change coming, driven by what he calls two mega-crises.
Okay.
And he even offers a pretty drastic solution, a plan B, moving to Paraguay.
Paraguay. Okay, right. So let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Our job here is to navigate these claims, which are, frankly, pretty alarming sometimes.
Yeah.
We want to understand the arguments Pols is making, look at the details of his alternative, but strictly through the lens of the source material he provides.
Exactly. No taking sides, just presenting his view.
So what could this mean for you listening right now? For your own understanding of, well, everything that's changing so fast. Let's dive in.
Okay.
So kicking off with this really bold statement, greatest robbery in history. What's actually being robbed here, according to Pols?
Well, according to him, it's everything, essentially all assets. He's talking businesses, homes, cars, pensions, savings.
Wow.
Yeah, he claims it's all destined to move towards the top. So the core idea isn't just money, it's a whole systematic shift of wealth and power, too, from everyday people to, well, a select few.
And a key part of this transfer, as he lays it out, is this idea of total control with programmable money. It sounds pretty concerning.
It does, yeah. Pols really emphasizes the planned rollout of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. He says some are even scheduled for October.
This October.
That's the claim. And he argues they're fundamentally different from the digital money we use now because they're programmable.
Programmable, yeah.
Meaning they could enable potentially 247 tracking of every single transaction, and maybe even dictating how, where, or when money can be spent.
Okay.
So his message is really urgent. He says the time to wait and see is over. He sees it as this critical moment where people have to make a conscious choice because the system, in his view, is closing in fast.
Okay, so why does Pols think this is all happening right now? He talks about these two mega crises pushing this great reset forward. What's the first one? The debt crisis.
That's right. He reminds everyone about the 2008 crash, which was obviously triggered by debt. But he says the situation now is way more severe.
How so?
He cites this staggering global debt-to-GDP ratio of 270%.
270%.
Yeah. Basically 3 times more debt out there than the entire world produces in a year.
That's hard to even wrap your head around.
Yeah.
What's the real point he's making with that number beyond just it's big?
Right. Well, Pols argues it's not just a number, it's a sign of a fundamental, completely unsustainable imbalance. His insight is that we owe 3 times what we make.
Which leads him to conclude that some kind of system-wide correction or reset is basically inevitable. And crucially, he thinks it won't be designed to benefit the public.
And he has actual figures for this debt.
Oh, yeah. Last year, he says, total global debt hit 315 trillion euros. Trillion. And broken down per person, it's about $195,000 in the U.S., maybe $88,000 in the EU, and a global average around $30,000. Per person. But what really jumps out in his analysis is the cost of just paying the interest on this debt.
Okay.
He says it's 100 trillion euros a year globally, just interest.
100 trillion.
Yeah, and he emphasizes that this is money that just can't be spent on society, on improvements, anything. It works out to about $600 per person every year, just vanishing into interest payments, making the whole system even more unstable in his view.
And this connects to money printing, right? I guess Pols sees that as pouring fuel on the fire.
Exactly. He says since 2008, 68% more money has been printed globally, but with hardly any real growth in productivity to match it.
He points to the U.S. especially, saying they've printed almost 3 times more money than back in 2008. And U.S. debt, rising at $115,000 per second.
Per second. That's insane.
A staggering figure. And he claims this isn't just happening, it's actively driving this huge redistribution of wealth from bottom to top. Not by accident, he says. but as a direct result of these policies.
And the source gives some pretty stark numbers on that redistribution too, doesn't it?
It does. Pols claims that since 2019, super billionaires saw their wealth shoot up by 6.3 trillion euros.
Wow.
While the global middle class actually lost 7 trillion euros, he even claims the 10 richest people got 518 million euros richer every single day.
Every day.
Per day. So for Pols, these aren't just stats, they're proof of what he calls the biggest wealth transfer from bottom to top in history, and it's actively making the majority poorer.
Okay. Wow. That's quite a detailed and alarming picture of the financial system from Pols.
Yeah.
So debt is one huge crisis driving this. What's the second good challenge he identifies behind this Great Reset?
The second mega crisis, according to Pols, is AI, artificial intelligence. Specifically, its massive impact on jobs, on work.
Right.
He makes this really bold claim that AI is going to take over 60 to 80% of all jobs.
60 to 80%. That's huge.
It is. And he says this will lead to hundreds of millions of people losing their sense of purpose that they get from work.
Does he explain, how he gets to that 60, 80% number?
Yeah.
Or what the immediate fallout is beyond just a loss of purpose?
He doesn't break down the calculation for the percentage, no, but he really focuses on that sense of purpose angle as a kind of psychological crisis. It's not just about getting unemployment checks. It's a fundamental shakeup where people start questioning their value in society. And what really seems to concern him is that he feels there's no public debate about this massive shift.
Right. You don't hear much discussion about what society looks like then.
Exactly. He questions what society becomes with potentially billions unemployed, and he seems deeply worried about the lack of conversation around such a fundamental change to, well, human existence. He suggests the silence might even be deliberate.
So Pols paints this picture: massive debt, an AI revolution changing work forever. But he doesn't see them as just happening randomly, does he? He links them to something more intentional.
Precisely. For Pols, these aren't just natural economic or technological forces. He sees them as the stage being set deliberately by what he calls a financial digital complex, entities that he believes are actively engineering this reset for their own benefit.
And how does he describe their view of ordinary people?
It's pretty grim. He claims this complex views individuals basically as useless eaters.
That's strong language.
Very. His argument is that they're driven only by power and control with zero regard for human rights or dignity. He uses these really stark images like intensive human farming.
Farming.
Yeah, milking people dry and then culling them when they're no longer seen as productive.
That's incredibly disturbing. What's the core insight he's trying to get across using terms that extreme?
It is unsettling. I think the insight Pols wants you to take away is this idea of complete dehumanization. He believes this complex isn't just after economic control, but actually sees humanity as just another resource, something to be managed, exploited, and then discarded when it's not useful or profitable to their system anymore. It implies this profound lack of ethics driving their whole agenda, in his view.
Okay, so you have these huge crises, this complex with this bleak view.
Yeah.
How does Pols say this translates into actual methods of control?
Well, he lays out two main scenarios he thinks they're pursuing to maintain power. Either accelerated centralization, basically, full-on totalitarian control using things like CBDCs, digital IDs, strict rules, or a hard financial crash, something that causes mass unemployment, social disruption, chaos, essentially.
And his conclusion?
His conclusion is that both paths, according to him, lead to the same place, a totalitarian society. He doesn't see them as real alternatives, just different routes to what he believes is a predetermined outcome.
Right. Let's dig into that a bit more. How does this alleged control and wealth transfer actually happen on the ground? You mentioned CBDCs are key. What makes them so powerful in Pols' view?
What Pols really zeroes in on is their programmability, that unique feature. He claims it allows for that 247 tracking of every single transaction.
Right.
And potentially setting conditions on how money can even be used. He points to the German coalition agreement. He says it mentions the word digital 187 times.
Wow.
And he claims it includes plans for mandatory digital IDs and bringing in CBDCs, with the government sort of proactively solving problems for citizens. The implication being the state steps in before you even know you have an issue.
Like preemptive intervention.
Something like that. And he also mentions the CBAM regulation, that's the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, as another piece of this puzzle. He sees it as an economic tool to enforce compliance with whatever the agenda is.
And it's not just digital stuff. Right. He talked about broader societal shifts, even an erosion of private property. What does that look like?
Yeah, he points to things he calls innocent-sounding articles, like reports about unemployment benefits in the Netherlands where you don't have to prove you're applying for jobs anymore.
Okay.
He frames this as a subtle step towards a universal basic income for everyone. He draws a parallel to Germany, where their long-term unemployment benefit, Hartz IV, got renamed to Bürgeld, which translates to citizens' money.
So changing the language makes it seem less like welfare.
That seems to be his interpretation, yeah. Making state dependency sound more normal, more acceptable. He connects this to the World Economic Forum, claiming they've suggested a good life doesn't necessarily have to be happy or meaningful. And what's really striking is he directly names a Dutch politician, Jesse Klaver. He claims Klaver openly said he'd abolish private property if elected. Pols suggests many other politicians probably feel the same way, just quietly.
So private property under threat.
Yeah.
And Pols also talks about inflation as another kind of robbery. How does he explain that?
He argues inflation isn't just some natural economic process. It's like a silent theft of your purchasing power, a constant drain on wealth.
Yeah.
He gives this really vivid example. A cup of coffee in the U.S. back in 1970 cost 25 cents.
Right.
But in 2024, it's, say, 3.8 euro in Europe. That's 16 times higher. But incomes, he says, have only gone up about 8 times in that same period.
You can buy less coffee.
Exactly. He calculates you've lost basically 1/3 of your purchasing power. He paints this picture of 1970 where maybe one person's income was enough for a family, a car, a house, even a 3-week holiday.
Yeah, the classic image.
And contrasts it sharply with today's economic reality. For him, this isn't just things getting more expensive. It's a deliberate mechanism transferring wealth away from ordinary people.
It definitely makes the point clear. And then he shifts to what he calls the looting of public funds. What examples does he give there, and what's the supposed purpose?
Well, he claims pension funds are losing tens of billions and are being sort of pushed or directed to invest in the defense industry. He questions the whole profit model of defense, hinting at a hidden agenda.
Okay.
He also talks about the big Corona Fund, 806.9 billion euros. He asserts that money wasn't actually used to help COVID victims, but instead to build the digital infrastructure for the coming system.
The control system he described earlier.
That's the connection he makes, yes. He also mentions 1,000 billion euros earmarked for climate financing, which he controversially calls a non-existent problem, while basic things like elder care or funding kids' swimming lessons are apparently short on cash.
So a massive misallocation of funds, in his view.
A massive diversion of public money. He argues it's not going towards genuine societal needs, but towards funding the expansion of control mechanisms and the infrastructure needed for this great reset.
And the war in Ukraine fits into this narrative of diverting funds, too.
It does, very prominently. Pols points to an 800 billion euro Ukraine war fund. He frames it as Europe being rapidly turned into a war economy, even drawing parallels to Orwell's 1984.
Strong stuff.
Yeah. He adds it all up and concludes that an incredible 2.4 trillion euros are being set aside for what he calls senseless goals instead of being invested back into society.
2.4 trillion.
And he further highlights that there's talk of targeting 1,000 billion euros in European savings for defense spending, suggesting it's about fueling more conflict and locking in this new war economy. So, yeah, his core argument is that public money is being systematically drained away from the public good and towards an agenda of control and conflict.
It's a very bleak, very comprehensive vision of control he's laying out, which raises a big question for many people. If these forces are so powerful, could political change make a difference? Like someone like Donald Trump, could he offer a way out? What does Pols' source material say about that?
Pols is actually pretty clear on this. He believes Trump won't provide a solution.
Really? Why not?
He claims that the whole digitalization agenda, replacing government workers with AI, all of that is moving ahead just as fast, if not faster, in the U.S. It mirrors what he sees happening elsewhere.
So the underlying trend is the same regardless.
From his perspective, yes. The fundamental direction doesn't change no matter who's nominally in charge, because he thinks the underlying forces driving it are too powerful and too embedded in the system already.
Okay. So if the situation is as dire as Pols paints it, and politics won't fix it, what's his call to action? He says waiting isn't an option.
That's right. He keeps coming back to that. A conscious choice has to be made. Even if you decide to stay within the current system, you need to choose consciously. Just hoping it will all work out is, in his words, an illusion.
So what kind of choice?
Well, he acknowledges there's no perfect, ideal country out there. But the goal, he says, should be to find places that might offer, decades of freedom.
Decades of freedom.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is he adds this layer of moral obligation. He argues people have a moral duty to secure their assets, maybe in gold, maybe real estate somewhere else,
Why a moral obligation?
to prevent those assets from being used, as he puts it, for war in Ukraine or anywhere else, or for building this new control system he's been describing. He sees protecting your assets as a direct act of resistance against the alleged robbery.
That's quite a framing, a moral dimension to financial planning. Which brings us finally to his specific plan B, Paraguay. Why Paraguay? What makes it the chosen spot for this alternative?
Pols presents Paraguay as having unique possibilities for people looking for this plan B. He talks a lot about Project Paraguay.
Right, the initiative he's involved with.
Exactly. He says it's about 18 months old and has seen unbelievable success, apparently attracting a really significant stream of Dutch people moving there.
And why now? What's driving that?
He points directly to the war in Ukraine as a major factor, saying it accelerated people's desire to find alternatives to get out.
And what's the experience like for people who go there, according to him?
He claims people often go through a kind of personal transformation, finding peace and tranquility. He describes a community they're building with this concept, each for themselves, all together.
So not a commune, but supportive.
Exactly. Fostering mutual support, people helping each other out, leading to new relationships, a sense of belonging, but without being like a strict commune.
Interesting balance. And what are the practical draws? The advantages Pols lists for Paraguay itself.
Well, he cites the climate, which is presumably favorable, a perceived lack of intrusive government, low taxes, and just generally a stronger sense of personal freedom compared to what he sees developing elsewhere. He mentions this expat community is growing fast. Apparently, the Netherlands is now one of the top 10 countries people are immigrating from to Paraguay, and his Project Paraguay alone claims to have helped over 300 individuals make that move.
Okay, so for anyone actually thinking about this Plan B, what kind of practical help does Project Paraguay offer? It's a huge life change, after all.
Yeah, they aim to provide pretty comprehensive support. Things like help right when you arrive, pickup, hotel, a couple of days with an agency tour to get oriented, ongoing support, access to a local network, and connecting newcomers with the hundreds of other Dutch people already there.
So help with the practicalities.
Right. And they also offer assistance with things like setting up a company or a subsidiary if you're moving a business. And for people who feel they need more hand-holding just to take that first step, they apparently even organize guided group trips, like one planned for September.
And a big part of this plan is securing assets. Like you said, real estate is key there. How does Paraguay fit into that strategy, according to Pols?
Paraguay is positioned as a safe haven for putting your money into land. He notes there's already an influx of money coming in from places like Canada and the U.S. for exactly this reason.
Why Paraguay specifically for real estate?
He highlights what he calls strong, protected property rights and a very low income tax on profits from property, just 5%, he claims. Plus, he asserts that real estate values are increasing rapidly, showing high growth rates. And importantly, there are no restrictions on foreigners owning property.
That sounds attractive if you're looking to move assets. What kind of help does Project Paraguay offer with actually buying property there?
They apparently provide A to Z guidance, from finding suitable plots of land to handling the whole transfer process. They focus particularly on areas seen as having high growth potential, like around the capital, Asuncion, and a region called Missions.
What kind of locations are available?
He paints a picture of dream locations, plots with lots of trees near rivers, forests. He does acknowledge that finding high-quality modern homes is still a bit challenging. The market is developing.
Correct.
He mentions building costs are up to maybe $600 per square meter. But Project Paraguay is actively working on creating more appealing options, like developing projects with villas. One with 13 villas is mostly sold, he says, and a new 9-hectare project on the Paraná River with 39 building plots. So trying to meet that growing demand.
Okay. And full disclosure, this deep dive is sponsored by VRB Adpeas Group, and their services seem relevant here too for the financial planning side of a Plan B.
Indeed they are. VRB Adpeas Group specializes in helping people, particularly entrepreneurs, with asset protection and setting up international investment structures, like establishing a BV, which is the Dutch version of a private limited company.
And how does that help?
Well, they claim that structure can potentially reduce your profit tax by up to 50%, offer better protection for your personal assets if a business runs into trouble, and generally make it easier to invest and operate globally. They offer resources like ebooks and consultations to help you figure out if that's the right move.
Right. Makes sense in this context.
Okay.
So there we have it. We've really journeyed through quite a powerful and, yeah, pretty concerning vision from our source, Jeroen Pols.
Definitely.
This idea of a world on the brink of a great reset, what he calls the greatest robbery in history. We've unpacked his claims about the staggering debt, the disruption from AI, the control mechanisms like CBDCs, the alleged looting of public funds.
And crucially, we also explored his proposed Plan B, the move to Paraguay, with its promise of freedom, community, and those practical steps for trying to secure your future and assets.
So you listening have now heard this unique and pretty urgent perspective. It's filled with very specific claims and a clear call to action about where society might be heading and what that means for personal liberty.
Yeah, Polls really challenges you to rethink your place in a world that's changing incredibly fast. So maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. Given these claims of huge societal shifts, these urgent calls to action, what does it really mean for you to secure your freedom and your assets in this interconnected, rapidly changing world? What kind of personal plan B, if any, might you start considering as these potential future scenarios unfold?